Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for the Real World of Sales, the one show where we really get down into some special, unusual, one-of-a-kind businesses. Show you how they sell their business. If they can do it, why can't you? What do you think, Ashley? Is it that easy?
It is, Paul, in ways. There's a lot to sales, and there's a lot we're learning on the show, which is awesome. And we have an amazing guest here today. We have Andrew. He's great at sales entrepreneurship. He's the director of USA SUMO. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, thanks so much, Ashley, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, Andrew. And sumo wrestling definitely is an interesting sport, and you're the expert in it here in America. But why don't you kick us off telling us how you got started in sumo?
That's a very long story, but briefly, I was working in Japan in the early 90s. So I started working in Japan in 1990, and I was there for part of the early 90s, and I followed sumo. I watched it, but I didn't participate back then. And I had done some other martial arts. So in the mid 90s, actually about 27, almost 28 years ago, I think, I saw a sumo exhibition that was at an expo here in LA. And they asked at the end, anyone want to come up and try? Because they had the real Japanese guys doing it. And I was with a friend, and he was a pretty big guy, and I kept urging him to try it. He finally said, "Okay, I'll do it if you come up and do it too." So I was 142 pounds back then. I've bulked up to
Wow.
155
Oh
after
my
all
gosh.
these decades. 155 now, but I was 142 pounds.
And how much
I
do the
tried.
sumo wrestlers usually weigh?
That's a long answer to that question. It really depends. But in pro sumo, you'd be surprised. There's guys of all sizes. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll get into that later. But yeah, long story short, so I tried it. It was a lot of fun. I started a club. I was teaching at UCLA at the time, and so I actually started in the late '90s the UCLA Sumo Club back then, which was, I'm pretty sure, was the first ever, and possibly even now the only officially recognized university sumo club in the country. It's kind of inactive right now, but that was kind of the genesis of what we've developed in the last 27 years or so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. That's interesting. So it's so you kind of like helped start it here and made it become like popular in the U.S. in this area, the sumo wrestling.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I started it because there's been different waves of people over the years. In fact, even over a century ago, there were some Japanese Americans who were keeping their traditions intact in different parts of mainly California and Hawaii. But that was, let's say a century ago, for a few decades, and it kind of slowly faded. And there's been different waves, but yeah, I'd say that in the last 27 years or so, we've made some big leaps forward into where sumo is at the moment. And there's a lot more
Yeah.
awareness, there's a lot more participation, and definitely a lot more appearances in the media and TV shows and things like that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen stuff online and things, and you see it on TV. And what do you think that like what do you like about sumo wrestling? So you do it yourself. You've been an athlete in sumo wrestling besides the business side of it.
Well, I still am actually. So I've been competing for almost every year for the past 27 years. The last time I actually competed in the national champion tournament was 2 years ago, I believe. So the last year or two is the first time I've taken a break or a gap or that long. But I train, I run practices and coach every week. So I'm constantly doing matches and training, even in my mid 50s. Uh, but it's
Yeah, that's
just
cool. That's
it's
good.
an enjoyable sport.
And
Um,
what are the sizes like of the guys that you wrestle against? Like what's like the heaviest sumo wrestler that you've like fought against or beat?
okay, well, I'm going to give some clarity to that afterwards, but I'll say just to briefly answer the question. So in the national championships, it's an amateur event. It was back in 2010, I believe, so 14 years ago. I was about 150, 155 pounds, and there's weight classes in amateur sumo, not in Japanese pro sumo, but in amateur sumo, there's weight classes, but there's also what's called the open weight division, which is really the way it's done in Japan. And in the open weight division at the national championships in 2010, my first match at 150 odd pounds was against Manny Yarborough, who had the Guinness World Records, and I think he still holds it today. The Guinness World Records is the heaviest athlete in the world, and he peaked at about 770 pounds. He might have only been like
Wow.
seven, yeah,
Oh
he might
my
have only been
gosh.
like 720, 730, pounds when I faced him, but still there was nearly a 600-pound differential.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Were you like really nervous when I mean, was he hard to like fight against and push out of the ring and stuff?
I wasn't too nervous because, I'd fought against larger guys, and it's not like you can punch and kick, so you're not going to really suffer blows to the face. Um, but
Like
I,
a
I
head.
did actually
Hmm.
I did actually manage to use some speed and work around him a few times. I have a video somewhere of it, but he um he finally
Yeah,
got
that's
me
cool to
after about
watch. Hmm.
yeah, he finally got me after about 30 seconds. So no problem there. It was a good fight.
No, that's cool. And that's what I think is interesting about it is like it's appealing because there's like the WWE or whatever it's called now, that wrestling, and they have like their style, like the way they dress and act and stuff. But then you have the sumo wrestling. It's just so interesting to see these like most people think of like the Japanese ones. I think that's where it's interesting to hear about you like talking about the amateurs and different weight levels and stuff because the Japanese sumo wrestlers are like so heavy, and then they wear like just a little piece of cloth and they're just like pushing each other, wrestling. You're just like, wow, what is this? It's like I don't know. It's like interesting. Something about it. What
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think that's interesting about it?
Well, it's definitely exotic. And so, yeah, I can talk about the weight you mentioned in a minute. But yeah, in terms of the attraction, there's a few points. One is, yeah, of course, it's exotic. You're not going to see kind of the attire and some of the rituals that are in sumo, Japanese sumo, especially in other sports. The other thing is that the match itself can be, 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It's very quick. And for a novice who's seeing it for the first time, it's pretty easy to understand. You either want to push the other person out of the ring or knock them down to the ground. So, I love so many other sports, but to be realistic, if someone's a newbie and they go to watch wrestling or they go to watch judo, which are similar to sumo in many ways, it's sometimes difficult because they're like, wait a second, he pinned him. Wait, he was on his shoulder. That's 2 points. Wait a second, how many rounds? And it gets a little bit confusing.
Yeah,
Well, when
yeah,
people come to the US Sumo Open that I'm producing now for the 24th year in a row, they get it immediately. They watch one match and they understand the rules basically in no time. And we do about 150 matches back to back in one tournament.
where's that
So
happening at, Andrew?
So yeah, the same play. So we've held the U.S. Sumo Open for 24 consecutive years, no gaps. And since 2014, almost every year we've been holding it at the Walter Pyramid at Cal State Long Beach, not too far from
Oh,
you folks in
okay.
Orange County.
Yeah, that's a nice area. It's a nice building there. They have basketball games and stuff.
I
Oh
got
yeah,
one
no,
question. Somebody tweeted in and wanted to know what's the history. This goes back centuries, doesn't it? I mean, what seems
yeah.
so simple is actually an art in Japan. I mean, it's taken quite seriously. It's been around for quite a long time.
Well, Paul, you're insulting us by saying centuries. We're talking millennia.
Millennia, okay.
So, yeah.
And
So
yeah,
to,
what seems, it's almost characterized here in this country. Two giant guys usually just kind of bumping into each other and trying to, in what looks like diapers almost here. And yet, it's really, you're saying, and many others, we had Manny Yarborough a million years ago. I guess he's since passed away, but, and he said it's really a beautiful sport. It's like a lot of Asian art, martial arts. It's very the training and the regiment and the mind and all the stuff. It's talk about that. Give us some insight into what we don't see.
well, first of all, Paul, you shouldn't say diapers. That's for waste collection, and we don't use the Mawashi for that purpose. So
See,
just to get some
I'm inadvertently insulting. I know Ashley compared it to World Wrestling WWE. That's what we're used to. This kind of comical wrestling here, and this is a very serious art form, and it's a serious sport, right?
It's global.
yeah,
It's global, and it's different culture too
So give
involved.
us the insight. What are we missing as Americans here?
well, you asked first of all about the sumo history. So there's references in Japanese culture and historical documents that talk about a mythological sumo fight that happened a couple thousand years ago, roughly 2,000 years ago, between two Japanese gods, basically to claim the territory of the Japanese island. So at least there's references to sumo that go back 20 centuries. But in terms of actual documented matches between humans, there are some references that show that people did sumo about 1,500 years ago.
Wow.
And if we talk about the current format of Japanese pro sumo, that is in a rudimentary form already existing about 400 years ago. And the fascinating thing is that in Japan, in pro sumo, the guys that currently compete in pro sumo live virtually the same way as their predecessors from centuries ago. And that's hard to fathom to most Westerners. But in Japan, actually, there's only two professions in Japan that live essentially the way their forefathers or foremothers lived centuries ago. And both of those professions, they have their hair tied up in top knots. They wear kimono most of the time, like the yukata or kimono, and they follow a traditional routine and regimen almost every single day of the year. And the professions are for women, geisha, and for men, sumo wrestlers. Now, some people in modern age might be insulted and say, wait a second, women can, I'm just talking about traditional Japanese culture. And an amateur level now, sumo is a sport for everyone. But just to answer your question about the history and the culture, it's incredibly deep in Japanese culture. I mean, even centuries ago, samurai used to often train in sumo wrestling as a way to build up their fitness and technique and their hand-to-hand fighting skills as well.
So in Japan, they live in a house. Is it like a dojo or something? Or they live in and they train and live uh, and follow a strict regimen to prepare and to get that big.
Yeah, so exactly. So in Japanese pro sumo, there's roughly 600 to 700 pro sumo wrestlers, and they each join a heya, which is like a team in this sense, or a stable, they would translate it as. But it's not like a sports team here. So let's say you join the Lakers or the Clippers here in LA. You have a few months of games, you have some practice, you have an off season. In pro sumo, it's more like the military, and that's why I'm saying it's like they lived centuries ago. Once you join, it's like joining a religious order or the military, because a lot of guys join when they're 15 years old. From the moment you join, you spend all day, every day in that one building, except when you're going shopping for food or you're going to an actual tournament, for example. Um, and they basically, every single day of the year, with very few exceptions, there's no real off season. There might be a day or two off here and there, but basically they wake up at dawn on every team. They train on an empty stomach the entire morning. So 4 or 5 hours straight of nonstop training. It's literally nonstop for 4 or 5 hours. Lose about 10, 15 pounds of sweat. They have a huge lunch, a stew. It's called chanko nabe, just bowls and bowls of that, bowls of rice. So they pack on the calories, take a nap. They have a nice siesta in the afternoon. And then in the later afternoon, after they wake up, some guys are doing more training. The lower rank guys have to do chores, cooking, cleaning.
Hey Andrew,
Uh,
how do they know if like someone's good enough to do sumo wrestling? Do they have to have like a certain physique or something to be a sumo wrestler and to start training?
that's a great question. So I'll answer first about Japanese pro sumo. In Japanese pro sumo, the requirements to join are you have to be, I believe, 15 years old. You have to finish middle school. And you have to be, I think the current requirement is you have to be, I believe it's 165 centimeters, which is about 5'5", so you don't have to be that tall, and 75 kilograms, which is about 165 pounds. So, that's the average American high school guy is bigger than that.
Yeah.
So there's not a severe restriction on size to join pro sumo.
Okay.
Um, Now, in amateur sumo, you could be any size, weight, male or female, and compete around the world. But the interesting thing in Japanese pro
Yeah,
sumo, they're not
definitely.
necessarily looking for the biggest guys, because you'd be surprised that many of the greatest sumo champions ever are not the bigger ones. They're the guys who are much
Really?
stronger, faster, and more skillful.
Hmm.
And you could make analogies in other sports. I mean, the greatest basketball player ever is not necessarily the guy who has the most height, who's the tallest. It might be someone who has better shooting skills, jumping ability, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Do they have to like lift weights and stuff though in order to get like bigger? Do they try to pack on pounds in order to fight their contenders, or how does like that kind of work?
yeah, so great question. So yeah, just to get, and of course, we don't want to dismiss the impact of weight. You definitely, generally, when you enter sumo in Japan, want to get bigger. I'll give you a really good example. So, arguably the GOAT, the greatest of all time in pro sumo in Japan, is a gentleman named Hakuho. And we had the good fortune to train I was in Japan a few months ago, and we had the good fortune to train with multiple pro sumo teams, which is a rare occurrence. And we trained with his team actually, which is amazing. And
Yeah, sounds like it. Hmm.
yeah, and in a career, very, very few sumo wrestlers, pro sumo wrestlers, maybe 1% ever win even a single top division tournament. And if someone retires and they've won one tournament, they're an absolute legend. They're famous everywhere they go. In history, the previous high was 32 about 80 years ago, 70 years ago, maybe 60 years ago. And no one thought that would ever be beaten. Well, this guy, Hakuho, he won his 45th tournament a couple of years ago, just before he
Wow.
retired.
Hmm. Oh my
And
gosh, that's a
we're
lot.
talking about, yeah, we're talking about basically the GOAT, the greatest ever in sumo. And when he entered pro sumo, he was about 70 kilograms. So that's about 154 pounds. He was 154 pounds, skinny as a post.
Yeah. Hmm.
And at his prime, he was about 340 pounds,
My gosh.
six
So
four,
he put on
340.
like 200 pounds. Wow.
Yeah, just about. But the funny thing is, most of that is muscle. And you'll see a lot of the sumo wrestlers do have like a large abdomen. But if you look at some American guys at the beach, a lot of them have rolls of fat. Most of the sumo wrestlers are like solid, as opposed, and they don't have a six pack, but they do have a one pack. It's one big solid mass of muscle there.
Hmm.
And a guy like Hakuho at 6'4", 340, he can move lightning fast. He'll move faster than almost anyone you've ever seen, like a sprint, like 100-meter sprinter.
Do you think?
Um,
Do you think? How do you think these guys would be like if they played football, like American football out here? Like they could probably do some good tackling.
Yeah, there's been actually some examples of crossover between football and sumo both ways. And some football players have done well in amateur sumo, and some sumo wrestlers have done well in football. The challenge is that because both of those sports are incredibly physically intense, if you're a young guy, it's hard to focus on both. And sometimes there's been like retired elite sumo wrestlers that I know of, who went to like NFL tryouts, and they were kind of scouted, but the thing is they were already 30 years old, so it was hard to get a position in the NFL. But there is a lot of crossover between those two sports.
So why do we think a sumo wrestlers is huge? Manny Yarborough, you said, was like 700 pounds. So our image of them is giant people that somehow pack on muscle and weight and everything. Is that a misconception in American part here?
Well, okay, so talking about Japanese sumo for starters, there are no weight classes in Japanese pro sumo. So it is advantageous to be larger. It's harder to push someone who's heavier. But if you get too big and you lose your mobility, that's not good. So just to give an example, out of the 600 or 700 pro sumo wrestlers, the average guy is probably something like, this is approximate, but probably like 5'9", 240 pounds, something like that, 5'10", maybe 250, in that range. If you look at the top division, the absolute all-stars, the best in the sport in Japan, the top 42 guys, those 42 guys are, this is pretty accurate. The average guy is about 6'1", 340 pounds. So 6'1", 340 is normal to be in the very,
That's pretty
very,
big.
So kind of like NFL linemen. I guess that'd be the average NFL lineman today, somewhere around 6 foot or more, and probably 253 to 350.
exactly. Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, if you look at the top division, even at the moment, there's a guy in the top division who's among the top, almost the top 10. He was recently the top 10 in all of pro sumo. He is about 5'7" and 250 pounds. And he routinely beats guys who are 350, 400. So there's a lot of technique there. And part of the technique involves, for example, the mawashi, the belt. That's not just a costume. You want to actually grab onto that belt so you can manipulate your opponent and get leverage.
So what are we missing when we watch it? Because it just seems like two huge guys bumping into each other here. What is the walk us through the elegance and the beauty? What are we not seeing? What are we not understanding here?
Well, I tell you what, Paul, why don't you step in the ring with one of the top guys?
Oh no, I'm not saying that this
Yeah,
is
let's watch.
easy.
I want to see that,
Yeah.
Paul.
Well, I actually mentioned that honestly because, you have no idea how fast they are.
No,
If
I
you
don't.
step into the ring, you will get blasted out in like half a second or less. So it's not, I wouldn't even say bumping. This is an absolute charge at full speed. It's like an airplane taking off, and they smash together. So when Americans who have some experience in other sports try sumo, even if they're very athletic, if they're going against an expert or a lot of the guys from Japan, they get beat routinely in 1 or 2 seconds. And the
Wow.
reason is they're not used to the speed. It takes them by surprise.
Yeah, the speed is important
Because
for sure.
I've only watched it a few times. It does seem hard to understand. It seems like two huge guys stare at each other and then sort of grapple and bump into each other, using because a lot of them have big, huge midsections here, so they use that to throw their weight around and push them around. But you're saying it's much more than it's rapid. It's leverage.
We're
It's
gonna
all
go
sorts of
to
things.
a contest or competition, Paul. You'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Is this talk about the state of sumo in the United States? How do you promote it? How popular is it? Is it growing? Is it talk to us about sumo in the U.S.
Yeah, Andrew's the leader for that.
Sure. Well, thanks. So yeah, so I started, actively doing sumo, like I said, 27 years ago. And I made some smaller tournaments in the late 90s. In 2001, I produced the first US Sumo Open. And that was one of the very first tournaments that included lots of competitors from around the world. We brought in high-ranked retired pro sumo guy as the special guest. And we've held that event every single year with no gaps from 2001 until this year, 2024. That tournament has continued for 24 years, and it is the largest annual sumo competition in the world outside of Japan. And you guys have it right under your noses there in Long Beach, not far from Orange
Yeah, I
County.
want to go see.
There you go. And the
I
next
wanna
one
watch
is
it.
when in May?
It's going to be May 11th, and we're going to get tickets for you, Ashley. And if Paul doesn't
Yeah,
keep
thanks,
calling it,
Andrew.
if Paul doesn't keep calling it a diaper, we might get him tickets
Oh,
too.
Yeah, Paul's gonna compete.
I feel so embarrassed, but I guess I'm showing my ignorance. I guess I'm just so Americans tend to caricature it. It
Yeah,
seems
no,
just
it's
two
okay.
huge guys and they're grappling and they're in this little
I think if
outfit.
it was like women, like heavy women doing that, it would be different. Guys might watch it though.
You think
Out
so?
here.
I don't know.
Well,
I
that's
don't think
that's
we
the thing.
understand what it is we're watching, so I don't think we
Yeah.
appreciate how long this is going on and how difficult it is.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, just to briefly answer the question. And first of all, yeah, we'll get you guys passes for May 11th, US
I'd love
Sumo
to
Open.
go. I really would. I think everybody should check it out.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And in fact, the timing, today's March 19th. Tomorrow on March 20th, the tickets go on sale. So for folks who want to get the best seats, they better check out usasumo.com tomorrow, March 20th, because the tickets officially go on sale. I think it's at 12 noon tomorrow. And it's not going to, the whole thing's not going to sell out in a day or two, but I think the ringside seats, the first 3 rows, those normally sell out almost immediately.
And when we go there, will we mostly see Japanese? They obviously are passionate about this. They understand it. I know these people are revered, the champions over there, in ways it's hard to understand. So is it mostly a Japanese, Asian audience that will go there, or have Americans flock to this and begin to understand it here? I don't know what the state of sumo is. How
Well,
much of
one
an
of the
inroad you made?
Yeah, one of the least represented groups I would say is probably Japanese people at the US Sumo Open.
Really? Okay.
Of course, because let's say you were living in Japan and someone said, "Hey, we're going to have a local Japanese high school football team. It's the greatest thing ever." And you're like, "Oh, I've seen NFL games. So for someone who's experienced pro sumo, very closely in Japan, it's not as thrilling perhaps to see international competitors going head to head.
Right.
But no, the interesting thing is our audience, we get about 5,000 people. We fill the pyramid,
Wow, that's a
and
lot.
it's absolutely, mainstream. So we have every kind of demographic represented in terms of, like you asked, ethnic groups, in terms of men and women, all ages, people of all backgrounds. And the really cool thing is we barely have promoted it. So we've spent in many years like virtually zero in a marketing budget, and people hear about it, they come once, and basically what happens is we have a customer for life. Because a lot of people, I hear this all the time, again and again. Someone's like, "Man, I didn't know about sumo. I thought it was kind of weird." And I checked it out. I'm like, oh, that was the coolest thing ever. And I've been coming to your tournament every year for the past 7 years. Like, I hear that repeatedly.
It's
So,
like word of mouth, or I think having it at the college is a good marketing right there.
well, we just like the venue. So that's just
Yeah,
a
it's a cool
fantastic
place,
venue.
and it's in the middle
Yeah.
of the greater between Los Angeles and San Diego and Orange County. It's an easy to get to for all these locations here.
Yeah.
So, and then this is strictly amateur, though. They don't win any prizes or anything. They win a trophy, but there's no money that they win off of this.
Well, actually, there are some prizes. There is a nominal monetary prize, but technically, because it's not Japanese pro sumo, we can't do massive purses. But the winners do get hundreds, probably not $1,000, but they also get oftentimes special gifts from sponsors. Sometimes different sponsors donate, like big screen TVs or
So,
um,
who are these people? Because they have to train intensely for this. They're passionate about this sport, and yet they have to have some regular job to support themselves. So, who are these people that are going out and pushing themselves to these limits here?
they're people like you, Paul. No,
They're definitely not people like me. I would, my hat's off to. We had somebody on recently talking about women's professional football, and at the moment, even though they're professionals, they get paid very little, so they have to have a day job, like original football did 100 years, 50 years ago, or whatever.
yeah.
And so it was a side thing. And so they talk about the passion, having to work your regular job, whatever you are, a realtor, a banker, a physical therapist, something, and then to go out and compete on the weekends and train and everything. That's a real commitment.
Yeah, definitely. So like we mentioned before, in Japanese pro sumo, it's 365 days a year.
Right.
They can't take any time off, so it's a whole lifestyle. In amateur sumo, yeah, people are doing it for the passion of the sport. They're not going to reap enormous rewards in terms of fame and fortune, most likely. But that's in a good sense. Everyone who goes up in that ring is doing it because they're so enthusiastic, they're
Yeah,
so
exactly.
energetic, and they love it. And that really shows during the competition. Everyone is really pumped up.
It's like a good
It's ex-
workout too, I think. It's a different kind of fighting, and instead of going to the gym, you can do your. Because I saw online on some of your stuff, Andrew. There's regular people like different backgrounds join the sumo wrestlers, men, women, different sizes. So these are the ones that compete and stuff in your tournament.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I've been running practices for 27 years here in LA, and we do them almost every week. And we get, yeah, a whole slice of every demographic in terms of people who try sumo. But in terms of the people who compete in the US Sumo Open, yeah, probably half or a little more than half are Americans from all over the country. We do get a lot of overseas competitors. And normally, most of the medals, if not almost all the medals, go to the international competitors because their level is so much higher. And part of that goes back to what you were saying, Paul, and that is some of the foreign teams, obviously Japan, Mongolia, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, a lot of these teams have large budgets from their countries to devote towards sport. And so the athletes from some of these countries, even though they're technically amateur, they don't need to necessarily work full time. They can focus a lot more on their training. So the level of competition at the US Sumo Open is actually pretty spectacularly high, considering that you're not actually seeing the pro sumo bouts in Japan.
And age range, when are you done as a sumo wrestler? It's got to be very intense, got to be hard on your body. Uh,
Well, in Japanese pro sumo, like I said, they can enter as young as 15. Usually they join when they're teenagers. And I would say it's similar to, let's say, pro football, because, if you're going into your mid to late 20s, that's pretty good if you avoided injuries and you keep in good shape. By the time you're 30 or early 30s,
right.
it's hard to maintain that level of training and keep injury free. So it's rare to see top level pro sumo wrestlers go beyond, early to mid 30s. That's extremely rare. In terms of amateur sumo, the age range is a little more diverse. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of Americans who were successful in the past in wrestling, football, judo, and other sports, and they enter sumo, they get into sumo for the first time, maybe in their 20s, maybe in their 30s. So sometimes they're a little bit older than you would see in Japan.
Probably not in their 60s like I am, though. Nobody in their late 60s here. All right, so if anybody wants to compete, is this literally open? Anybody can just sign up and pay an entrance fee and take their shot?
Well, we do
As
some degree of
ridiculous
That might
as
be
that would
tough,
be,
though.
yeah, as ridiculous as that would
You
seem,
might get hurt.
but I mean,
we do
yeah,
Yeah, we generally do some degree of screening. In other words, even if someone's coming from another state, we want to check to make sure they've had some at least basic training, they know the rituals.
Right.
But to your point, the range of sumo ability is pretty diverse at the tournament. What you'll see though is the people with limited experience or ability, they normally get eliminated early in the day. Like the doors open at 11 a.m. Kind of the big important matches start after 1 p.m. And so most of the guys who are not that talented or they're just not that experienced, they're generally almost done for the day in the morning.
Right.
And you'll see the top matches going on basically from about 1 to 4 p.m. So if you really want to see everything, come to the US Sumo Open on May 11th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you just want to catch the very best matches, come at about 1 p.m.
And who are the hot contenders? Who are you expecting to be among the top 10 here? Are they Americans? You mentioned Ukrainians and Poles and other things. I never thought of Ukrainians and Poles and other people competing.
Well, a lot of these countries have great wrestling traditions.
Yeah, right.
And
They
so
sure
it
do.
transitions well into sumo. Um, I'll say some interesting facts briefly, and I want to mention one other thing after this. Besides the U.S. Sumo Open, if you really want to see elite level Japanese sumo, we're doing a very rare series of events in late June. I'll talk about that in a minute. But
Okay.
in terms of who to watch this year at the U.S. Sumo Open, there was a guy with us for about 13, 14 years. He sadly passed away a few years ago. Four-time world champion. He spent 5 years in Japanese pro sumo. His name's Byamba, and he competed for 13 years at the US Sumo Open. He won 10 heavyweight gold medals, 7 open weight gold medals. His overall record was 107 wins. Excuse me, 110 wins. Sorry, Byamba. 110 wins and 7 losses. Imagine a boxer going 110 and
Wow.
7.
Hard
That's
to
pretty
imagine.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So he was an absolute legend. I don't know if anyone can ever break his record in the US Sumo Open, but there is one guy to watch this year especially, and that's a guy called Mende. He trained in Japan on and off for years. He's from Mongolia. Mende, actually, I don't know. I think you have video there. Mende, here he is. Here's the program from last year.
Okay.
And Mende is barely over 300 pounds. Here's a guy who's over 400. So, but Mende beat everyone. In his first US Sumo Open in 2022, he went 14-0. Last year, he went 13-0. So he's 27 wins,
Wow.
undefeated. Here he is right there.
Hey Andrew, how does the tournament work? Do they you when you lose you're out and then it's kind of like March Madness and you keep competing, or
Or is
do
it double
you pair them up?
elimination? Yeah.
Like certain people pair.
Some of these
Together.
sports are double elimination, so you lose, then you go to the second bracket, you can work your way back up. So is it just single elimination?
It's not single elimination. We all, especially if a guy's flying in, like there's one guy who usually flies in from Sri Lanka and he has 4 flights, sometimes 5 flights. It takes him about almost 48 hours. We don't want him to fly in, lose his first match and be done. So for the athletes, even if they're not the greatest athletes, we normally do it kind of World Cup style, soccer World Cup style, or certain sports do that where it's not single elimination. You kind of do a round robin in your own group, a group of maybe 4 or 5 people, and the top 2 in the group would advance to the quarterfinals or semifinals. So everyone gets at least a few shots to win some matches.
Are they like paired up or grouped based on their size?
Doesn't
Or
sound
they're-
like it.
how good they are?
You keep gravitating to this idea that they all have to
I
be the
don't know.
same size.
I'm
and
just
I see they're.
imagining like a small person, like fighting this like.
I'm hearing that
800
if you're
pound
fast
guy,
enough and you get enough skill,
seems
you can knock the big
intimidating.
guy out of the ring here.
Yeah, maybe
what I'm
you can
hearing.
you can fool him. I think you should do some tricks in sumo wrestling. I mean, if
There
I
are
was
lo-
doing it, that's what I would do. To be honest, just like
That's
look
right.
over here, and then it's like basketball. You just knock them out.
Fake him out, huh? Right.
Exactly.
There are a lot of tricks. Yeah, you can hit the person, then kind of slide to one side or do different twists and stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, the U.S. Sumo Open follows the guidelines of international sumo. So there are weight classes, and within each weight class, there would be a champion. And at the end of the day, there's the open weight competition where everyone, regardless of size, would compete together. And the open weight, because it's a lot of people, oftentimes 40 guys, for example, out of about 60, 70 total competitors, we generally do single elimination for that one, but guys are seeded based on their past results. But I want to add one more thing. May 11th, US Sumo Open, again, that's the biggest annual sumo tournament in the world outside of Japan. But we are doing a very rare event that I mentioned, which is we're calling All-Star Sumo. And that's going to be at the end of June. So if you like the US Sumo Open on May 11th, or even if you can't make it and you don't want to miss sumo, we haven't officially announced the dates. And in fact, I can probably announce them here for the first time on your
Okay,
show.
we love that.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's
awesome.
All-Star Sumo is also going to be at the Walter Pyramid in Cal State Long Beach. And the dates that should be announced soon, I can't actually officially say it, but I will say it for you guys,
Okay.
will be June 22nd, 23rd, and also the next weekend after that up in San Francisco. But for that event on June 22nd, 23rd, we are bringing in mostly guys from Japan.
Wow.
And some of these
The
guys from
pros.
Japan, yes, some of the guys
Mm-hmm.
were absolute legends in the pros. One of them in particular, he won the Emperor's Cup, which would be like in tennis, let's say, it would be like winning Wimbledon. It would be like the unbelievably
Wow.
high,
Oh my
almost the
gosh.
highest level guy.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
So
so
we get a
that's good.
chance to see that level of competition. Start with the Open, see the amateur rounds, and then if you like it, you can come back and see the best of the best. A rare chance
That's
to
right.
see
Yeah.
the best of the
And
best.
and just to clarify, each of them have their own appeal because at the US Sumo Open on May 11th, you'll see about 60 competitors from all over the world, different weight classes. It's really a thrilling event to see all the emotion, intensity, the
I'll
different
bet.
styles.
It's like watching college basketball versus pro basketball, or college football versus pro football. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are differences beyond that too, though, because the All-Star events in late June are going to feature. There's no weight classes. They're all going against each other in a round robin. There's about 8 of these elite sumo champions, mostly
Oh my
Japanese.
gosh. That's so
And
cool.
so, yeah, it's going to be a very special, very rare event. So I encourage everyone to check out both of these.
And
If
you
it
say
goes,
women can do
Yeah,
this now in the
definitely.
United States, not in Japan, but in the United States. So there are women sumo competitions, women on competing with other women. They never cross compete. You don't have men and women competing.
well, just to clarify something you said, Paul, actually, in amateur sumo, women compete all over the world, including in Japan.
Okay.
In Japanese pro
Pro
sumo, it's
sumo.
only men.
Okay.
As an amateur sport internationally, women compete in all of the world events. We've had women competing in the US Sumo Open since 2001, since the very first US Sumo Open. So you will see both men and women on May 11th at the US Sumo Open. For the all-star competition, because a lot of these guys have pro sumo experience in Japan, it's only going to be these elite level
Gotcha.
men. So it is a little bit different kind of style and flavor in terms of the two events, but they each
Yeah.
have their own appeal.
We got to get
Yeah, they look
Ashley to
different.
join up here. I think that would
Oh
be
yeah,
great.
I'm gonna do some sumo wrestling. I'll be there in May. You guys can watch.
Wait, Ashley, I think you said you're only going to do it if Paul does it too, right?
You're
That's
trying
right,
to pull me
Paul.
into this.
That's right, Paul. You
Why
have to
don't
join
pull me
too.
into this thing here.
Do some sumo. We're gonna start
I
practicing.
wouldn't even know what I'm doing. I'd be one of those guys who would get eliminated in half a second. I say, "What happened? What happened? I don't even know what happened."
You need to fix your hair, Paul, a bit.
In a top knot
And
here.
then
or
you need to
something?
like lift some weights and stuff. And then I think you'll
Yeah.
be ready.
I wouldn't have a clue. How long does the average match last? Is it
For you, about half a second.
Yeah,
For most,
well, no question about that.
for most, I'm just kidding. I like you,
That's
Paul.
knocking
You're,
someone out though, right?
we like Paul because
Feel
he
free
like,
to pick on me because I really, first of all, I started off by calling it a diaper. I couldn't have said anything
Yeah.
worse here, but that's what it looks like to me, and that's
So
what
you can take a
inappropriate thing
bit.
to say.
But you know,
I
in
can
America,
see-
they don't wear the same clothes though, like in the May competition. And they
Well-
dress different.
Well, no, here's the thing. In amateur sumo, a lot of the guys wear only the mawashi, just like in pro sumo. However, for people who don't like to get as much exposure, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
there is an
Wanna
option
hang
for, yeah, well, no, if it's tied properly, nothing's going to be revealed.
Okay.
But
That'd be
but,
my
it-
first thing. The whole thing would unravel, and there I'd feel like a
That's
fool.
right. I'm thinking like more women should be watching the sumo wrestling. Like I think
I was about to
if they
I was
heard
about to
about
say
it.
that actually we do have a lot of women, and maybe that's part of the appeal because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's pretty amazing as opposed to, let's say, MMA, where I think it skews heavily toward men. In sumo, it's almost 50-50 when it comes to live attendance at the event.
That's amazing.
So a lot of women love the sport because number one,
Mm-hmm.
it's very elegant. There's rituals, there's respect and bowing, there's a lot of culture. And number two, there's normally not a lot of bloodshed. It's not brutally beating
That's
something
true.
up.
Right.
I mean,
beating someone
I
up.
think women gonna like to see naked guys wrestling. You know,
Speak for
I mean, there's
speak
some
for
value.
yourself. Speak for
Absolutely.
yourself, Ashley. No, just kidding.
Is this-
but to
this
answer-
is-
to answer- yeah,
like
to
we're
answer your
diving
que-
into Ashley's psyche here or something.
Yeah, we're gonna get her after
Sorry.
anyway. No, but no. To answer your question, in amateur sumo, Some of the guys do go traditional, like they go in Japan. Others, if they don't want to do that, you can wear for men like tight shorts under the belt. For women in amateur sumo, they can wear kind of like a leotard under the belt. So functionally, the mawashi, the belt, still works in the same way, but you're just covering,
Right.
body parts to be not to be inappropriate in
I'm
the.
telling you, everybody should see this, me included. One time, you got to go out and check it out. Who knows? You might get hooked on this thing here. Ashley's
Yeah,
already getting hot and bothered here.
it's
This idea
fun.
of big guys wrestling around here.
Are they single, Andrew? Any single guys that are fighting?
Some of them
Ashley's
are, some of them are actually. In fact, I probably shouldn't say this because I'm going to embarrass him, but I'm pretty sure that Mende, the guy I said who's 27-0, the Mongolian guy,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think he might be open-minded. And Ashley, even if he's not your
Oh,
type,
okay.
maybe there's a listener out there who wants to meet Mende.
There you go. We'll set him up
Yeah.
on a dream date with Mende here.
All
He is
right.
he is a former world champion, and
Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's great. That's my
yeah,
type.
I know we have to go soon, but
Yeah.
I had a couple other cool things that just occurred to me that might be interesting as well. Because did you have anything else you wanted? I mean, I talked about the tournaments, but
No,
anything else?
last thing you're going to do is plug it one more time, give it to us, but give us your quick facts, and then we got to go.
Oh, sure. I was going to say, I know this show is about sales and business. I could have talked a little bit about that if that's of interest. And
We'll
one
have to
other,
have you come back
Yeah,
again and
sure.
talk about that. We got so deep into naked guys, not naked guys, whatever Ashley's description
don't say
was.
Wrestlers.
diaper.
Big
Well, they're
guys
called-
with not a lot on here, right?
Just say loincloths. There you go.
Loincloth. That's
Um,
what I should have said. Loincloth.
Yeah.
Loincloth.
I will say one last thing, and this is interesting too, probably to your listeners. We can talk about the business another time, but because sumo's so exotic and because I've brought over a lot of these world champion guys, there's been so much interest on the entertainment side, and we could spend 5 hours talking about all of the major feature films and TV shows
I'll
and
bet. Yeah.
different events. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty fascinating how the culture transitions into something that people really want to see, like we did. I can reveal this now, but years ago we did Elon Musk's birthday party, for example, which was quite scene.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we,
Wow.
we've done
So
So
we've
he
done a
hired you
lot of.
guys for
Yeah.
his birthday party?
Oh yeah, a lot of celebrity. I can't say all the names now because they're confidential, but a lot of Hollywood celebrities, a lot of Silicon Valley people,
Why not?
royalty overseas. We just did a tour.
Perfect.
We did a tour all over Australia a couple months ago. So the world champion guys that we have, including the guys we're bringing in June, they do a lot of appearances where it's educational and cultural. So it's very meaningful, but it's also very entertaining,
If
fun.
you're
And
Elon Musk, you've thought of every party you can think of. Why not have sumo wrestlers there? And many
Yep.
people like that. Just the novelty of it, the uniqueness of it.
So,
and the
so
culture.
to Paul, in a few years, when you hit 35 years old, we'll do it for your birthday too.
All right.
I think you missed
Yay.
that one, but all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and bearing through our barbs and mistaken ideas here and our typically American view of this is just big, huge guys bumping into each other in loincloths. It's clearly something more. It's gone on for thousands of years. I know it's revered in Japan. And from that one and only episode we did years ago with 700-pound Manny Yarborough, I had a whole new respect for what these guys go through and train and do to achieve this, and the difficulty of trying to bump another guy out of the ring here without. This isn't boxing. You're not punching him in the face here or something. This isn't judo. You're not throwing him over your shoulder. You're finding a way to maneuver him into a place he doesn't want to go, out of the ring.
Yep.
Well, actually,
Wrestling.
the one thing there, it's not just bumping. There's a lot of pushing and thrusting.
Yes.
There
Yes.
are a lot of throws like judo. Actually, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of slams, acrobatics, gymnastic moves. But anyway, I know we got to go, so we'll definitely get you guys passes for the May 11th U.S. Sumo Open.
Love to come. I'd love to take my grandson
Right.
and see what he thinks of it. My 10-year-old grandson, and see how he
Oh.
reacts to it.
The kids love it. The kids go
I bet
nuts.
they would,
So
because it's like, and again, they've grown up seeing, you know, WWF or WWE or something. They've seen this kind of fake wrestling. To see people doing it for real, I think would be something amazing.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
thank you
sounds
so
like a
much.
lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate the chance to talk about it. And
Website
well-
one more time. Where do they go to learn more and to get tickets?
yeah, sure. So the website is www.usasumo, that's sumo.com. And tomorrow, March 20th, the tickets go on sale. So again, if you
Don't
want
be
good
late.
seats, yeah, I'm just being honest because people come to me a week from now and they're like, I wanted the ringside, the VIP floor seats. The good seats go within a few days at the most. So the other seats are still great, but if you really want to be up close and
It's
personal, you
hard to
better
see
act
what's
quick.
happening if you're up in the rafters here. You want to be close to the action. So
Yeah, well, the venue is beautiful though. So even the upper
Yeah, it
seats
is.
get a
I
great
have
view.
been there. It's a really cool place
Yeah.
to watch. I think it was built for basketball. I think originally here. Yeah.
Exactly. It's basically a 5,000 seat basketball gym, and every seat you can see the action really well. If you like proximity, though, you better get tickets
And it's
quickly.
like a pyramid on the outside, right?
It is not like a pyramid. It is a pyramid.
It's
In
a
fact,
pyramid.
I think it's the
Purple.
second. It's like a
Purple
bluish color. It's a blue. Yeah. I think it's the second biggest pyramid in North America after Luxor in Las Vegas. So
There you
it's a
go.
pretty exotic venue too.
There you
Yeah,
go.
hard to miss.
Okay, thanks for
sounds like a
coming
lot
on.
of fun.
Ashley, you
everybody get
found
your
another
tickets.
one here. Who knew there was a sumo right here in our backyard, and that the biggest event
Yep.
in the world, maybe in the certainly in the country here, is right coming up in our backyard here. Who knew?
Biggest
we are
in the
so
world
lucky.
outside of Japan. So we got to have that caveat. Japan
Okay.
has the biggest, but
Thank you,
outside of
Andrew.
Japan,
We
it's
need
This
you
is
on to
amazing.
clarify. Everything we want to do is we're making wild statements and
You know-
misrepresentations. So we
no,
want to
Ashley.
clarify.
Ashley's been correct. You're just sticking your foot in your mouth, Paul.
Well, that's why I can't go in the ring because I get in trouble here.
Yeah, Paul's going to start doing sumo. You'll see, Andrew.
All right, thanks for coming on.
All right, my pleasure. Take care.
Well, there you have it. Don't hear it from me. I got it all wrong. Go find out for yourself why sumo is around for thousands of years. The beauty, the power, the impressive performance can be right here in our own backyard. Check it out. Right here on the Real World of Sales on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Blind Innovation Center.